Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Ink and Fig. My name is Alex, and today I'm finally going to make an attempt to put 2022 behind me. Those eagle-eyed among you may note that I haven't done a wrap-up video since October, so it's been a while since I've actually discussed what I've read. November, December were very lean reading months for me. I didn't get a whole lot done. Again, sort of as we all know, mental health really given me the gloves in the latter half of last year. So, I did what I could, and frankly, I finished 2 books a month in November and December, and I'm totally okay with that. I have some news about December, so we're gonna get to that when we get to it, but let's go ahead and start off with November. So, last time I did a wrap-up video, I mentioned that I had actually gotten a pretty good way through Ruin and Rising in October. The thing is, this already seems like it was like 8 years ago, but I got married at the end of October, so I got a little bit busy in the last week of that month, so I never actually ended up finishing Ruin and Rising. So this was my first finish of November, and it was a shocking ending, actually, for me. I thought that I had read some spoilers somewhere about how this was gonna shake out, and it did not go that way. I thought there was gonna be a couple more characters who died at the end of this that didn't, and the direction that we went in terms of like the amplifiers that we've been searching for this whole time, wow. I was actually kind of floored, honestly. I wasn't expecting that good of an ending. The writing obviously was about the same quality as the rest of the series. Pretty, 3.5, 4-star quality. The characters didn't go through as much development and sort of profound wrapping up as I was hoping for. But they were still likable. They were still the characters we know and love, so it was pretty good. What really got me about this was definitely the ending. So, like, that just really put it over the edge for me. I believe I ended up wrapping this book up at a 4-star, and this concluded, finally, for me, the Shadow and Bone trilogy. It was a wild ride. It definitely didn't strike me as much as Six of Crows did, but overall, I did have a good time. The writing wasn't stellar, as I've mentioned sort of ad nauseum through this whole thing. It wasn't stellar, but it really sucked me in and kept me going throughout the entirety of that series. I really enjoyed the journey that I went on with these books, and frankly, I thought that they read quite quickly for me as someone who reads quite slowly. I have a lot of difficulty sometimes finishing books, and I was really stunned to discover that I was able to finish these 400+ page books in under a week. Like, for me, that's a really big deal, so that definitely speaks to the engagement level of these books. Again, they weren't stellar, but they were engaging and they were fun. So I'm gonna give the whole series overall a 4-star. Definitely amped up by the fact that I just enjoyed myself, and removing a star, obviously, for my previous critiques about the writing and the diversity of the cast and stuff like that. So Shadow and Bone, overall, 4-star. Really glad I read it, but more to the fact, now I can go ahead and finally read the King of Scars duology, which I am so stoked about. I cannot wait to see Nina again. I can't wait to see what Nikolai gets up to. So excited about that. So after having previously DNF'd this book earlier in the year, I did come back to it and I read the whole thing, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I was talking a big game. Obviously, we all know this. I was really like, oh, who hasn't read this myth before? Everyone knows how it ends, And like, I'm definitely sticking my foot in my mouth, big time. This book, although it stuck to the myth pretty closely that I know and love and did that story justice, in my opinion, I think it really gave them the ending that they deserved. The very last page got me. I thought I was gonna make it through this book without crying. I really thought I was gonna get there. After all that big game that I was talking, I really honestly thought I was gonna get there, and then the last page, it just... I get it now. I get it, and everyone was right. It was so good. The storytelling style was very interesting. I'm not sure how I felt about it. It almost felt a little bit stiff in the cadence sometimes. And what I mean by that was she mixed whether or not this is like a very, very technical nitpick, but she mixed whether or not she used contractions. And sometimes that created a very stilted pace for the narrative. And that stopped me up a little bit. So that was just sort of a thing with her writing style that I wasn't entirely sure I vibed with. It definitely affected my immersion in the book. So that was something that I noted for sure. But otherwise, the pacing of the story was really good. We were introduced to again, anybody who's read, the Odyssey or the Iliad or knows about those myths knows how broad the cast is for this particular war. And I think we were introduced to all of the characters in a really accessible way, and we were able to follow what was going on and who was who and who was fighting who was related to who. It was really big and sprawling, and I did have a bit of an edge in that case because I have done studies in this area before, so I kind of knew more or less who everybody was, but I still found it to be quite accessibly approached, and I really appreciated that. So ultimately, Song of Achilles came out with a 4.5 star. As good as it was, and it did make me cry, and I will concede that point, I didn't love it. Like, this book didn't touch me quite as profoundly as it has for others. Yeah, so 4.5 stars basically for my enjoyment level of the book. All right, let's talk about December. So if you watched my December TBR, you know I had a whole thing planned. There were like 5 books on the list. No, there were 6 books on the list. We really hammered them out. And I was like, yeah, we're gonna see how many of these 6 I can read. I read 1. Now, I did mention earlier in the video that I read 2 books in December. Basically, I started the month reading Ninth House, and I had, as I usually do, have trouble with like a first in the series for Leigh Bardugo. I find it takes me until about halfway through the book before I actually finally like connect to the story and the characters, and like it really takes that plot twist to bring me around to the book. And that happened with Ninth House. So I was kind of stagnating through to the halfway point, and then I ended up blasting through the second half at the beginning of January. The reason that I did not read almost any of those 6 books was the fact that finally, after months of waiting at my local library, Nona the Ninth came through. It held up. Like, I had really hyped this book up in my head because I love Gideon so much and I loved Harrow so much. I was like, Nona is gonna absolutely slap. And then I was like, but like, what if it doesn't? No, I should never have doubted Tamsin Muir. Come on. This book, 5 out of 5 out of the gate. I can tell you that already. The writing was fantastic. The characters, well developed. We kind of went into almost an entirely new cast in this book for setting reasons. We ended up basically on, I believe it was Earth. I don't know if that's for sure. We were on a planet in any case. And we had the people who live there, people who are not house as it's described, and they were all super well developed. There was a dog. There was a 6-legged dog named Noodle. His name was Noodle. Come on. It doesn't get any better than that. Nona herself was such a sweetheart. I was rooting for her the whole way through. The ending struck me deeply, and I am so excited to read Alecto in a year from now. Like, the direction that this story is going is just gonna be like a firework finale. It's gonna be huge. And we're getting really into, especially with this one, with like the dream sequences, we really got into sort of the deeper philosophy that is fueling the themes and the undercurrent and the more overarching metaphorical plot of this book. And it's been really interesting to try to pick that apart and sort of reconcile it with my own view of the world and of life and how life works and the direction in which humanity is going. So at the end of the day, this book was incredible. It absolutely lived up to my hype. I'm in love. I'm in love. I'm in love. Absolute 5 stars. And the reason that I got this from the library is because I am collecting the softcover versions. So I have my softcover pre-ordered and I still have to wait until September before it's released. But when it's released, I will finally own this. I'm probably going to try to reread this at some point this year. Like before Alecto, I think I want to go through all 3 of the previous books in this series so that I can really come into Alecto knowing where we're coming from, having the whole story under my belt. So I may be reading this once again in 2023. All right, and then if you watched my January TBR, you know that I managed to complete my last moon that we did in my December TBR. So I had 1 moon left and we got it. And that was to read Medicine Walk by Richard Wagamese. Oh my god, this book wrecked me. The premise for the book is that 16-year-old Frank is called up by his father to come visit him in town. So he goes down from the farm where he's up in the mountains where he stays with the old man, and he goes down into town to go meet his father. Every time he has gone to meet his father in the past, he has been desperately disappointed because his father's an addict, basically, and addicts don't necessarily work on real time. Sometimes they work on the time of the substance or the thing that they are addicted to. That's just how life works sometimes. And that's the relationship that Frank's dad, Eldon, has with alcohol. I am not going to get emotional when I'm talking about this book. I'm definitely going to get emotional. We're not going to cry anyway. So he goes to see his father and he finds him in his cups as usual, and they sort of sit down to have a man-to-man talk, and his dad says, I need you to take me up into the mountains and bury me there. Like, what? You've had the most estranged relationship for the last 16 years, and this is the request you make? Go bury me in the mountains. Like, that is heart-wrenching. So they get on the horse and they pack up and they go out to the mountains. And Eldon ends up, over the course of the following days, telling Frank a series of stories about his young life that explained how he got addicted to alcohol in the first place, what the traumas in his life were that led up to that, and the people that he lost along the way to various different things. And along the way, we watch Eldon sort of detox in his final days. He's dying of liver failure. And we see such a human connection between these 2 men, or a teenager and a man, however you want to frame it. These 2 people are related and they don't know each other, and they're going through the last days of one of their lives, and it's just a profoundly human experience. And watching, now this is very personal for me, but watching Eldon go through his final days and come to terms with things and explain his pathologies behind certain things reminded me of my grandfather in a lot of ways, because he closed his life with a lot of stories untold and a lot of, again, pathologies that people didn't necessarily understand and don't necessarily understand. And, you know, we've tried to be sympathetic to that, but you don't really know necessarily what those things are that haunts a person and then how those things manifest in a life. So in a very profound way, watching Eldon slowly die and come to terms with his life in this book helped me in the journey of healing a wound with a family member that I've since lost. This book was extremely heavy, and it clearly talks a lot about generations, generational trauma, addiction, generational addiction trauma, you know, things like that. It really gets into it. It gets into the question of manhood and manliness and toxic masculinity and what it is to raise a man, which I find very interesting as someone who has not been a part of that experience. I clearly was not raised male, and male figures in my life treated me a certain way based on my gender and gender expression that doesn't necessarily line up with the experience as put forward in this book. So that was really eye-opening for me as well. At the end of the day, this book got 5 stars from me for the sheer profoundness of it and just the impact that it had on me personally in terms of my journey in life and the people that I know. So 5 stars for this. December, we read 2 books, but 2 5 stars. It was a heck of a month. That is where we're going to cut it off today. Thank you so much for joining me for this. I'm glad to have finally gotten these 2 months wrapped up and talked about so that I can move forward into 2023. I am still planning a year-end awards video. I'm hopefully going to have that out in the next little while. That is my hope, is we're going to get that awards video up soon so that you can see exactly what happened with 22, and then we can peacefully leave that year in the past where it belongs. And we can move forward into 2023 nice and refreshed and ready to go for a new year. So thank you so much for joining me. Once again, don't forget to go follow me on all of my social media at Ink and Fig. On Instagram, I have moved all of my book stuff over to Ink and Fig Reads, as Ink and Fig is sort of more about just my life in general. Pop down below and hit the subscribe button if you have not done so yet, and hit the little bell so that you know when I upload, because sometimes my uploads are sporadic and then YouTube doesn't like telling you about them, so that's just how it goes sometimes. Feel free to leave a comment and a like if you feel so moved, so that other people can come and join us as well. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!